Hello, and welcome to Take Control of Your Career. If you are looking to level up in your career, you are in the right place. Today, our guest is Kate Eisler. She is the CEO of the WMarketplace, founder of Be Bold Now, and author of Breaking Borders. Kate, so glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, let's just go ahead and get started. You have such an interesting story. I read about it in your book, which, by the way, is super engaging and fun and easy to read. So tell us about your career journey and walk us through that.
So I like to kind of refer to my career as working in technology for what felt like 200 years, until a really long time, but a very unlikely start to it. I worked at an ad agency and ended up having someone call me who was an ex-employee and say, this small company that I'm working for is looking for people, and I think you'd be a good fit knowing what you've done. And so I was like, well, I don't know anything about technology, but what the heck? And so I interviewed and got a job with that small company, Microsoft. And it was
Back in the super early days, maybe right after they came out of a garage.
almost, yeah, I was amazed. And they were 3,000 people globally, which I was, like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal and this is really fun. And so I worked for them in the early days when they really were interested in people that were, behind the mission and wanted to work hard and make a difference in the world because we were introducing technology. And so it was all about the vision of a computer on every desk and in every home. And I then thought that there was tons of opportunities around and started to raise my hand. Someone that I worked with, I got an announcement that he got a job in Paris, and I thought that sounded like a great idea. And so I raised my hand and said, I want to do that. And spent the rest of my career traveling and living overseas with a husband and family. I promised my husband it would only be a couple of years and it would be a big adventure. And 6 moves, 3 kids, and almost 20 years later, we came back to the US.
Wow.
Yep.
That is an adventure.
And then I became an entrepreneur and, left big corporate and have had the opportunity to start 3 startups, marginally successful, the first one, and then, the other 2 are working well.
Excellent. Well, I love how you've just taken so many opportunities. You've seen things that look interesting, and then you just go for it. And that's one of the things with women, especially where, I think there's this concern around I need to be perfect, or I want to make sure that I fill all the qualifications for the roles. But for you, it sounds like, hey, that sounds interesting. I just want to do it and give it a try, and I'll figure it out.
That's exactly what it is, because I, in reality, had none of the qualifications, and oftentimes I think I have none now. So I am a 2018 college graduate. So my whole career at Microsoft all around the world was without a college degree, but with ambition and, sort of smarts and paying attention. I spent the first 10 years of my life living in a hotel. And when I think about that, it's not a Hyatt or a Marriott that you would think of, it's Holiday Inn. And so I didn't have sort of that platform of network and financial backing and qualifications that one would think. But the one thing that is consistent, and it is still consistent in my life today, is I can't imagine how I would live with not trying something, because what's the worst that could happen? You could fail and learn something versus regret. What if I could have been very successful at that thing that interests me or excited me, or I felt like it was my calling? Those are the kind of evaluations I go through regularly when I decide about an opportunity. And part of my mission every day is to inspire women to kind of not think that being perfect and being, having all of those things lined up is the only way to success, because I think it's just not.
Yeah, it's all about the journey rather than just the destination. And one of the things that you say early in the book that really resonated with me in your lessons learned is that when a job doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And so push yourself to move on before you're pushed. I think that's such a great career and life lesson. And I talk to a lot of people, especially earlier in their career, where, maybe it's not, they're not feeling super engaged or passionate about what they're doing. And, the reality is it's probably showing up in their work as well. And so I admire the process that you went through to figure out, how do I try new things to figure out what's going to work and what's going to fit for me?
Well, I think that that's really true because I stayed in places because I felt, as you say, that change was scary. I had responsibilities. I was the breadwinner for my family. How could I possibly try something new? Because I know this situation, it's not good, but I know it. And so I should stick in there because I can manage it. And that shows up. You cannot, you can't hide from yourself. And you can't, if you are unhappy and uncomfortable, you're not bringing your best self. And I know that sort of sounds cliche, but we all know, if you're having a bad day, you're not going to be great. And if you're having a bad day every day, it begins to work on you and your self-esteem. And, when you think about the voices that we all have in the back of our heads, it only spirals. And so I think that taking an opportunity to change things when you know it isn't right, there's strategies to do that. There is talk to your friends, build your confidence back in a way in which you are able to take that step, and talk to people who will support you in taking that step. Because again, I stayed 2 years too long at Microsoft when I knew better, and I knew that I would be more successful afterward. And gosh, regret. That's my big regret, that I didn't jump off the ship before I did.
Yeah, it's like we regret the things that we don't do, not the things that we do.
That's it. That's
Yeah, but
exactly.
at least you did it. So you eventually got to the place where you took the risk. So we'll dig more into that transition a little bit later. But while we're still on the topic of Microsoft, I want you to tell the story about how early in your career you experienced a pretty significant failure and you were still able to bounce back. So tell us about that and how that influenced your career even to this day.
So I did an enormous company-wide error very publicly in the media. So the first job I had, because I had come from an advertising agency, was in the advertising group, and I had the responsibility for advertising the mouse as the biggest operating system release that Microsoft had done at the time, which was Windows 3.0. And it was the first one that you needed a mouse to work, really needed it. And so I was on a team and, was leading this ad development, and we had a beautiful ad, and we had, it was going to be sold like a car, and it was redesigned, and it was this gorgeous white, hard plastic thing that you'd use with your computer. And it was great. And I inadvertently advertised it as the launch date of the operating system changed. I did not update all the publications on the media schedule, and this beautiful ad showed up in the press about 6 weeks before the official announcement that there was a product called Windows 3.0 coming in the market. And so it was terrible, and I was mortified, and thought, well, my career has been fabulous at Microsoft, less than a year, but it's over now. And I was convinced that I would be fired. And I, created a mitigation plan and told everybody what to say and took responsibility and moved forward. And my boss happened to be out of the office that day. It came in the Monday after this had all happened, showed me the ad, and I said, here's what I've done. And all that was said was, don't ever let that happen again. It was incredibly meaningful to me because, first of all, I had to take responsibility. There was nowhere to hide. It was very public, and I had to think of a plan. And the plan, was probably good. There could have been other things to do, but the important leadership lesson was nobody dragged me through the mud for years about that. They said, don't do it again. You took responsibility, now move forward. And I was able to learn and regroup. And boy, I never did it again. There was always sort of a mental checklist of things before public announcements. But the fact is that was brilliant leadership to say, you've made this mistake, but that's not who you are. Recover.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
use
The
that.
other thing that I love about it is that you just immediately went into action. You took responsibility, you put the plan together. And so it was a solution-oriented approach, which is, of course, what all companies are looking for, even in the best of times, much less the worst of times.
Mhm. And I think that as a leader, I think about that with my people because you get, you tend to react sometimes when people do things and you're like, how could you? And what, that's not helpful. It's just not helpful. And so you've got to think about, be constructive on both sides of that, whether you've done it or whether you're managing around that.
Mhm.
That's kind of key. And I do think about that was a long time ago. And I think about, whew, how do I react? That's sort of a similar thing, either side of it.
Yeah, yeah, great. Well, another early experience that you had was some international travel before you joined Microsoft, and then you also built this bug for international travel, which is along the lines of what you said. You saw this friend that had this opportunity in Paris and said, "Hey, I want that." So tell us how you leveraged your network to make that happen, because you had a goal, and it sounds like, at least from the book, that one of your main strategies was making sure you're connecting with the right people who will make that happen for you.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I got very clear about, and I've used it ever since, is figuring out, here's what I'd like the outcome to be, and really focusing on that and building around that. And so, I think that when you have a goal, rarely the way to achieve that is a straight line. And I think that we get very fixated on, well, I have to do these 5 steps because then that's going to take me to my goal. And you get frustrated when step 3 doesn't really work out like you do, and it derails you. And so what I've learned is um, really look broadly at what are the different paths to achieving that goal. And so what I did there was talk to everyone I could think of that was either providing information about what would that be like to work overseas and to live there, and what could I contribute in that way, and what would my life be like, because those are things that you have to think about that are not, I want to work internationally as one piece. And so I really looked around it, and then, started talking to people about my ambition. And really the agility of that ambition was, gosh, what would that look like, and how would I need to change, or how would that ambition need to be more focused? And, broadly working overseas, what did that mean? In what capacity? What would I be willing to do that? And how would that impact, how would I feel like that was achieving my goal or not? And so I talked to tons of people about tons of things, and really sort of did it turned out to be like a PR campaign, so that when I was approached with an opportunity that was not at all what I had anticipated it would be, I thought Paris, London, maybe Sydney, that would be great, because this guy went to Paris. And the company, somebody in the company came to me and said, how about the Middle East? I was like, wait a minute. I'm a woman with a toddler, and I'm going to talk my husband into quitting his job and going with me to the Middle East. But, I decided that it was worth a chance, and it really changed my life in so many ways. And it was unbelievably exciting. And it was, rallying around and understanding the parameters of your goal is something I've used to this day. When I wanted to start this business, I talked to lots of people about what would it be and what would it be like, and how would you engage with it, all of those sorts of things. And you have to listen to do that.
Yeah, yeah, great. Now, tell us a little bit more about what it was like to live and work in the Middle East in the 90s as a woman, as a leader, as an executive. So paint us that picture.
No, it was, I was completely unprepared, first of all. But it was some of the most rewarding times because I was a really unexpected participant all the time. I was
I bet.
asked coffee and order lunch and, and I really sort of delivered all of the bad news for the company's office to our partners because in reality there was it was sort of surprising that I would be there. And I had the opportunity to really expand my business knowledge. So I was there and no one expected it. So I asked questions and had to be thoughtful about that culture and respectful. And the thing that set me up really unbelievably was an ally that I happened to have at Microsoft, who was a leader who came to Dubai when I had been there about a month, so not very long, talked to all of our partners and said, this is a person that we've intentionally asked to be here. And so you need to listen. And so when we think about our network and our allyship, I asked him to help do that, and he did. And it was an amazing thing. And I think that, again, women, we are reluctant to ask sometimes for that help because we can do it ourselves. Rarely do we do anything on our own.
Right.
It is always a community. And so I built a community around that. And I have lots of funny stories in terms of, you know, the question I was asked all the time is, what does your husband do? And I was like, well, he stays at home with the kids because I'm sure he's the only non-working male spouse for tens of thousands of miles in the early 90s in the Middle East. So it was very unique. But again, it was really rewarding because I, sort of stepped out and took chances that I don't know I ever would have done if I hadn't have taken the biggest chance and had that ambition. Because again, what's the worst that could happen? I could be told no. I could be ignored, which, I'm not easily ignored. But it was a really interesting time, and I was ambitious and interested is really what happened.
Yeah, I want to go back to that interaction that you had with that man who spoke for you, because that is such a pivotal part early in your career there, I imagine. And the fact that you asked for his help and his endorsement, and then he gave it, you can kind of transpose that in lots of other scenarios where you're asking for sponsorship in an organization. A lot of times, people are just hoping that they're going to be noticed and their good work is going to speak for itself. But part of that, part of managing a large and complex organization in your career is, how do you build those relationships? So you had the trust and you had the relationship there, and then you made the ask, because he might have thought to do it, but he might not have thought to do it. And it sounds like it was a critical result for you long term.
It was. I think that there's a couple of things that you said in there that are really salient to me. It's, if we work hard, someone will notice. And my experience is, I wish that would happen. It rarely does because we're all doing that. We're all working so hard that I think that, our vision becomes restricted about what other people are doing, and we're not mind readers. And I always say to people, it is not, you're not disturbing, you are not bothering, any of that. It is about expressing what you need. And I think it's also about being aware of your surroundings when you do that and how you do that. I might not have asked that in a Western business situation because I don't know that I thought about it at the time that it was really important. But, being in my situation and understanding what the business culture was drove me to ask. And so I think that if we take that into our everyday lives in any kind of business situation, and you think, let's take myself out of me for a minute and look at the surrounding and the situation and how could it be viewed from the outside, and what support do I need? Do I need an ally that is, speaking for me or that is advocating behind closed doors for me? What is the cadence of business or the situation? And then seek out people and ask, because to ask for something and articulate that will gain you support generally and allies is what I have found, because people see you as, oh, I hadn't thought about that person in that way. And it makes them aware.
Exactly, just taking that initiative.
Mhm.
And you've been so successful in a lot of environments that weren't necessarily great for women's careers, like technology, Middle East. So what are some of the top pieces of advice that you might have for women challenging some of the limits? Because now you've made it your mission to inspire other women to challenge the limits of society. So what top advice do you have?
So I think a couple of things is, one is, look around for your support group, and who is that support group? And I think that those people can be um, in your family or in your professional life, and you can have councils of people in different places. And so I have a council, and it's a council that, people kind of come on and off of depending on the situation in my life. So build a council that supports what you are looking for, whether that is, a new job or a new family situation, or whatever you're trying to do. But make sure that that council will be honest with you, right? That it's diverse enough to say that's a
Right.
really dumb idea. Because I have people on my council that have been on my council for years that go, yeah, no, that is not you, and that is, or that's not achievable, or that's just crazy. And
Yeah, it's like you need that diversity of thought. So you need the people who are there to give you a hug when you need the pep talk
mhm.
and love you unconditionally. And then you also need the people that are going to tell it to you like it is and just tell you that's a terrible idea, or at least challenge you. Have you really thought through this?
That's exactly, and go, oh, no, that is not going to work out for all kinds of reasons. So I think that that's key. And I do think, whatever gets whatever helps you get over your internal voice and your internal fear. I tell myself every day that, I go back and forth between, who do you think you are? And, oh, I can do that. So, and whatever it takes to do that, I have strategies that I use sometimes that is very introverted, and I don't talk to other people about it, but there's sometimes I'm like, okay, how do I get over this thing? Because this is a crazy fear, or it's a crazy tape recording in the back of my head that I've heard forever that I can't do or I shouldn't do, or, and you have to develop strategies to do that. And
Yeah.
again,
And we all have that tape recorder in our head.
for sure. I mean, it's crazy. I think every day, who do I think I am? But as I do that, the other thing I think about is I try and be an example, because I am the person that you would never have said, oh my gosh, that young woman is going to be super successful. I am not that person. And so I'm like, I try and tell people
So what do
that.
you think, what would you say is the secret to your success, especially in technology, in these foreign environments where you didn't necessarily have culture on your side? What was the key to your success at an organization as big and complex as Microsoft?
I am determined is really part of it. And I can't live with, what if I didn't try? What if I didn't say that? Or what if I didn't ask for that job? Or what if I didn't just make the assumption that I could do it? When I went to the Middle East, I remember being on the plane seriously and thinking, what if they find out that I have no skills to do this? But I'm like, get through it, man. My success was really based on, I think I can do this and I can't live without trying.
Yep, I love it.
And every day, I don't have a long history of e-commerce background, but I'm like, okay, I need people around me who do have a specific background, and I'm going to start this business because I feel compelled to do it. And so I'm still in that camp every day.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about that because you pivoted your career. You told us earlier in the conversation that you probably stayed a couple of years too long in corporate. And so explain the process that you went through to discern your next steps.
Oh my goodness. So I was really in a very low place. No self-esteem, terrible. And I had a friend of a friend approach me and say, I've got a startup and I've got an idea and I have funding, but they need someone to run the business. Will you do it? And I thought, oh yeah, how hard can this be? This will be good. It's a small team. I can do this. It was incredibly hard. It was incredibly hard, but it gave me a purpose. And so I kind of was like, okay, I've got to build back up. I decided to go back to school because things in the back of your head tend to limit you. And no, I looked for jobs and people said, what year did you get your degree and what it was it in? And I was like, I have 25 years of experience. It's none of these things. And I didn't get lots of jobs because it was a requirement. So I said, I'm going to do that. And then I really got to the point where I had to follow my passion because what I realized in the first startup that I ran is it was a great market opportunity. I had funding to do it, but I didn't have the network and I wasn't passionate about the problem I was solving. And so I went through a process of how can I make a difference in the world and what will fill me up and make me feel like I'm contributing. And that's where I went. And, the first thing I did was one of my very close friends and I started to host International Women's Day because, alongside a healthcare technology business, that was something that filled me up. And I quickly realized that that's where my passion was because I don't know that I would have said that before. So it wasn't a lifelong, I'm going to achieve gender equity. And then I kind of looked back at my life and went, that's what I've been doing for years. And it feels so right. And as we talked about, when you know something isn't right, you can't show up your best self. The minute I figured out that this was right and started to look at where am I the happiest? Where am I most successful? Where am I moving forward in a great, a way that feels good? It is creating an environment to support women and to drive forward for gender equity. And that's what's led my whole transition. And I can't imagine having any other job now.
I love it. And thank you for giving that great framework to think about career transitions and thinking about next steps because I talk to so many women, especially in a corporate environment, who still do have that itch to do something on their own, whether it's by themselves, with a spouse or partner. And, it's awesome to hear how you went about that process. And so just tell us a little bit as we wrap up about the WMarketplace and I think our listeners would love to hear about it.
So, my belief is that women doing business with women will change the world. So, the W Marketplace is really built on that. We are trying to be the economic engine for women. And as I said, as the pandemic began, I started to read about how women were disproportionately affected and so needed to, find something to put money directly in their bank accounts. And so everyone was shopping online. So I thought, why not? Let's have an e-commerce platform. And so that was our original go in so that there are merchants that are, as you said, women have an itch to do something. So there's lots of them with side businesses that are selling product and their services because as a women business owner, I could rarely find a group of services without spending a bunch of time with my network. Do you know an attorney? Do you know a bookkeeper? Do you know a coach? All of those things. So I wanted to find a place that we could accommodate those sorts of businesses and offer, women the opportunity to shop for merchandise and services and in fact nonprofits that they wanted to participate in all in one platform. And now we have ended up with women doing business with women on the platform. So our merchants sometimes need bookkeepers and they hire them. Everyone needs coaches, they hire them. We have 400 brands, over 400 brands, and 2,800 products today. So it's a
Awesome.
thriving internet platform. And Women make 85% of the purchasing decisions.
Right.
Imagine if we bought from each other. It could be great.
I always talk about being intentional in your career. So let's be intentional in your purchasing as well to support other women. So I love that. And it's a great place for us to wrap up. I appreciate all the amazing insights and stories that you shared with us on your journey. So many things to learn from you. Thank you, Kate. And anything to add about where people can find your book, Breaking Borders?
Absolutely. On the WMarketplace.com, all one word, and you can buy it there. And we would love for you to come and shop and patronize women.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.